Hello, I'm Valerie Biden Owens, chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Justin Bibb, Mayor of Cleveland, Ohio since January 2022. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us on this episode of All Politics is Personal, a program where we introduce the public to the person behind the politician. We know anyone can research your policies and accomplishments, but that's not what we're about today. We're here to talk about you. So tell us, if you will, what it was like growing up Bibb.
That's a great question. Native son of Cleveland. I grew up on the southeast side of the city. My parents divorced when I was 4, but always showed me the best of our community and the best of this country. My dad was a fireman and a police officer for over 30 plus years. My mom's a social worker. And so growing up in Cleveland, I've always understood the importance of public service, the importance of giving back. And Cleveland, as a city, as you know, has an amazing sense of grit and resiliency. And it's those elements that allowed me to become mayor of this great city.
Do you have siblings?
I do, an older half-brother.
And how much older?
I think he's 8 years older
What's
than me.
his name?
Donovan Bibb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in a multi-generational home like we did? I mean, we always had a relative to come to visit, and then they'd stay for 6 weeks. You know,
Same thing. So when my parents divorced, my dad went to live with his parents in Shaker Heights, a more wealthy suburb, and I went to live with my mom in the inner city of Cleveland. And we went to my grandma's house, Grandma Sarah, who was a ripe young 92 years old.
At the time?
Oh, no, right now.
Oh.
Right now. But Grandma Sarah's house was everybody's home in my family. It was me, my mom, my cousin Chris, and my Aunt Pam. And then my uncles, Tommy and Mike, would always be in the house too. And then we'd had relatives from Alabama always come up in the summertime. So it was truly a home full of a lot of love and a lot of good soul food every day of the week.
Who was the disciplinarian?
Grandma Sarah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I remember not being able to get breakfast on the weekends until we shoveled the snow.
Oh.
And so Grandma Sarah always laid down the hammer in our household.
Some things never change. That's what you have to worry about, Mayor.
When
you
you're
can't
mayor,
have breakfast
absolutely.
until you shovel the snow.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Did you like school?
I did.
Were you a good student?
It took me a while to get there. I was a sports junkie as a kid growing up in Cleveland. I remember making a makeshift basketball court on our front door with a crate, or going up to our park to play ball when I could. My dream before I wanted to become mayor was to be the next LeBron James, and obviously that path didn't work out.
Did you pursue it?
I did. I was actually dunking by the time I was a sophomore in high school. I was going to a lot of basketball camps across the country. Yeah. During my sophomore year, we were playing my high school rival, and I tore my meniscus going up for a rebound.
Oh.
And my mom, and I'm going to give the censored version of this conversation, she said, look, you're not the next LeBron James. You better figure out what you want to do. Because at the time, I had about a 2.3 GPA in high school. And so she said, you're kind of a good public speaker. Try out for mock trial. So I tried out for mock trial. I was so amped up for the interview that I bombed the tryout. So I go to my locker. I'm like crying. But I see a kid with a Wes Clark for President t-shirt on. I'm like, what's this? He's like, I'm volunteering on this presidential campaign. Come check it out. And I was starting to watch The West Wing at the time. I'm like, oh, this might be cool. So I volunteered on that campaign. You know, Wes Clark didn't become the nominee that year. Kerry did. So I got involved in the Kerry campaign, and that's when I got the political bug.
Wes Clark, I worked for years with Joe Slade White, a media consulting firm.
Okay.
And we did all Wes Clark's political ads.
Oh, wow.
So I was on that Wes Clark side too.
Yes, that's awesome.
Isn't it funny though how serendipity comes? I mean, here you're going to be LeBron James.
Yeah.
You tear your knee.
Yeah.
You get up and you have grit. Like my dad said, it's not how often you get knocked down. It's how quickly you get back up.
Absolutely.
And look where you ended up.
Absolutely.
Did you Did you even think of being in politics before that?
It didn't really resonate with me until I started working on that first campaign. But I was really immersed in politics before I even knew it. My grandma was one of the first neighborhood activists on our block. And in the early 1990s, we were at the heart of the crack epidemic in Cleveland. And she started our first street club. And I remember going to the corner store, getting cookies and tea to serve to the councilman and the police commander. And they'd have meetings in our living room on that plastic couch, because in the Black household, all the furniture is still covered in plastic. And I saw my grandma convene the community to talk about how to keep our block safe for our neighbors. And that was my first, representation of what organizing is all about and what political activism is all about.
So would that be kind of when the light switch went on?
It did. And I was lucky to, leave my block in Cleveland to go and study at American University in DC. And I was a freshman in high school during 9/11. And I thought the best way to serve my country when I went to college was study international relations, learn Arabic, and be in the Foreign Service.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So I go to DC, and I got a fellowship to do community organizing in Anacostia in Southeast DC. And when I was knocking on doors and mobilizing students in Southeast DC, a lot of those kids looked like me, had the same background that I had from Cleveland. And I said, something's not clicking for me. We have so much work to do in cities like Washington and Cleveland and Detroit that I shouldn't take my talents abroad. We got to fix America's inner cities. And so that's when I created a major in urban studies and started this journey to become mayor as a freshman in college.
Well, tell me if this is an urban myth or not, but I was told that when you were 16 years old, you had already decided that you wanted to be mayor?
Yeah. I knew I'd come back home at one point. I didn't know when or the right timing or the right path. My mom always told me to go off, get the skills you need, the education you need, the relationships you need, and bring your talents home. Like LeBron came back in 2014 to bring a championship back to Cleveland. Yeah. He called me and said, Bibb, it's time to come back. And I came back home in 2014 from New York and started this journey.
One of the questions I was going to ask you, growing up in my home, Mom and Dad always had refrains that we heard over and over again, like, well, your word is your bond. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how quickly you get back up. I don't care what all the other kids are doing, you're not doing it, Valerie. Did you have any of those refrains that you just could, in the middle of, in your sleep, you heard them?
Two, both from my mom. The first being, well done is better than well said. And that's really been my North Star throughout my entire life. And the second was the importance of integrity and commitment. I remember her dragging me to choir practice every Saturday. And I would just hate it because I'd want to go play basketball or hang out with my friends on the block. And she says, no, you signed up to be in this choir. You're going to show up every Saturday morning and make sure you show up with integrity and stick by your commitments. And I think that those early lessons gave me the work ethic I have right now.
The kids that you grew up with, did they go along with you? Are you representative of the kids on the block?
Unfortunately, I'm not. A lot of kids I grew up with are either dead, in jail, or still on the block, unfortunately. It's the sad story that you see in many cities like Cleveland across the country. And it's why the work of mayors is so important in this country right now, to make sure that the promise of America can be realized in every part of this nation.
So when we talk about all politics is personal, it is. That's what the kids in the neighborhood, what you want to bring back and change.
There's this old saying about survivor's remorse. And part of me always feels like I don't deserve it. I think about my cousin who who was like a brother to me growing up in my house, Chris. And we had almost the same upbringing, the same values. But, you know, he made a couple of bad decisions, which altered his entire life. And he was murdered nearly 6 years ago by his partner, who choked him to death. And his murder really showed to me the fragility of life and how one bad choice, if we don't have a strong social safety net of good mental health, of good quality schools, of good education, the odds may be stacked against you. And so that's why my work as mayor is so important to me.
So everything in your life experience has led up to
Absolutely.
You're living what you think to be true.
Absolutely.
You're doing what was your first job?
My first job was doing construction with my uncle, putting a plaster on the walls. I didn't last long. And that's when I realized I better stay focused in school. And then my second job, I was a caddy. And I knew nothing about business. And I started to hear about the Wall Street Journal and markets and networking. And that's when I started to understand this is how the world really works.
Your first job, you said, or your first political experience is Wes Clark.
Wes Clark.
So
yeah.
what did you do for Wes Clark?
I was just an average volunteer, knocking on doors, getting Wes Clark on the ballot in Ohio, working to mobilize other volunteers to get involved in the campaign, running phone banks. And so those early lessons, I applied to my own campaign.
So this is a big jump. Okay, your first experience, Wes Clark, you're in college and you're studying and you see that you want to go back home and you want to do right by your community and your neighborhood. And then, so you just wake up and you run for mayor? Like, what were you thinking?
That's a good question. I think what happened for me was I moved back to Cleveland from New York after working in finance for a couple of years. Came back to get my law degree and my MBA at Case Western. Was working at the same time. Got involved in a lot of community.
Wait, run that by me again, okay?
Yeah.
At the same time, you were doing 3
JD and an MBA and working at the same time. I'm a glutton for punishment. I know I'm kind of crazy.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you're either crazy or you're a great inspiration to. I mean, what did your mother feed you as a kid?
I don't know. So I started to get involved in a lot of boards and community organizations, and I started to see this hunger and desire for bold, new, dynamic, visionary leadership in Cleveland. And 2020 happens. I see our response as a city to COVID-19, which I was completely disappointed by. And then George Floyd's murdered. Mm-hmm. And I looked across the country at the time and I saw other mayors from Richmond to Birmingham, marching with their residents, talking to police, having hard conversations, and Cleveland was absent. And I said, this is the time for me to step up. It's the time for my generation to be a part of making the promise of America real in Cleveland. And so,
well, did the organization accept you? The party?
No. I mean,
Is Cleveland's race nonpartisan?
It's a nonpartisan race.
Okay.
So the top 2 vote getters go to the general election in November.
So did you have any structured leadership? Or
No.
Behind you?
This
is a familiar tale.
When I announced my campaign, I was at 1% in the polls, and I started raising money quietly before my announcement. Was able to raise about $220,000 in 3 months from friends and families and folks I worked with for over the last decade or so. And then, we started knocking on doors, started doing meet and greets on Zoom at the height of the pandemic. And I would show up anywhere in the city, people would hear me. Barbershops, salons, backyards. Mm-hmm. I even went to a couple of goat farms. I was everywhere in the city.
Those goats, they carry a lot of weight.
They do. Yeah. They do. And
the fact you showed up carries a lot of weight.
Absolutely.
You got to show up.
And I think that's so important now as we as a nation try to restore trust back in government and trust in our elected officials once again. And this isn't a partisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's missing from America right now is how do we show up, not when it's just time for an election, but show up every single day. And the listening also has to continue once you're in office because, when I was knocking on doors, many of the voters I talked to said, look, this is the first time a candidate has ever knocked on my door asking for my vote.
Mm-hmm. How close was the election?
Well, I won the primary by over 10 points, and then I won the general election by over 23 points.
Well, God bless you.
Thank you.
That's what goes. All politics is personal. You know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So, how much longer do you have in your term?
There are no term limits in Cleveland.
So, the sky is the limit.
The sky is the limit. I have a 4-year term, and being mayor of Cleveland is the best job I could ever have in politics. And if all goes well, I pray the voters will allow me to get another term to execute my vision for the city. And I'll leave it up to the man above to determine what's next after that.
Well, I'm glad you're going to continue as mayor because I sure wouldn't want you primarying my brother.
No, you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Valerie.
you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I have a few rapid-fire questions.
Let's do it.
Game? Okay. Now, as a Biden, I have to ask you this first question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Do you share?
No.
I don't either. I'm the only girl with 3 brothers.
Yeah.
What's mine is mine.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you be involved with?
I'd be a DJ.
You
I
would?
love music. Yeah.
What's your favorite kind of music?
I love hip hop. I love old school jazz, old school R&B. I have a broad, eclectic taste.
Can you play any musical instrument?
I was in gospel choir in college.
So you can sing.
I got a little.
Can you dance?
I'm all right on the dance floor.
Yeah, you okay?
It's got to be a good song.
Okay, all right. What's one word to describe yourself?
Energetic.
What's your favorite TV show?
The Wire.
Do you have a hidden talent?
Hidden talent. I probably would say I'm really good at spinning, cycling.
You are?
Yeah.
And that's because you have all those streets snow plowed and everything's
exactly.
clear
and on a good day.
On a good day, do you have a police escort when you're cycling?
Oh, yeah. When I cycle and when I run.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yes. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Bringing people together.
Well, you can do that right now, Mr. Mayor. You're exhibiting your superpower.
Absolutely.
One last thing.
Yeah.
What's your theme song?
Started from the Bottom, Now We're Here by Drake. That's my go-to.
All right. Well, I'm all for you. I'm watching you soar, man.
Thank you.
I'm watching you soar. And thank you for being on this episode of All Politics is
Thanks
Personal.
For having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you to our sponsor, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And remember, all politics is personal.